I'm Օֆելյա Զալյան. I represent Helsinki Citizens Assembly Vanadzor. Torture was criminalized in Armenia in 2015, and since then Armenia has undertaken a number of obligations in terms of reducing torture cases and increasing effectiveness of investigation into criminal cases. It should be mentioned that over certain recent years, the authorities have done some work to practically ensure prohibition of torture. As a result of legislative changes of 2022, application of the statute of limitations and amnesty was prohibited for crimes of torture. The scope of the concept of an official was expanded to include as subjects of torture state and public officials, persons entitled to act on behalf of local self-government bodies or non-profit organizations established by the community. However, the new criminal code criminalized only corpus delicti of torture, severe physical pain or mental suffering. Acts of cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment are not included as types of crimes. Unfortunately, the poor enforcement of the law continues to be the biggest problem. Despite numerous torture reports, there is only one conviction of the crime of torture, which entered into legal force in March 2022. The practice of improper documentation of torture cases continues, as a result of which the fact of torture or ill treatment is not recognized. Some perpetrators of torture, including police officers, prison administration representatives, not only remain unpunished, but are sometimes even promoted. Introduction of the Institute of Compensation of Torture Survivors in the domestic legislation implies its permanent functioning at the expense of the state. However, to date, there are no state-funded rehabilitation centers for torture survivors. Now, in the condition of ongoing practice of torture and ill treatment by Azerbaijan against ethnic Armenians, which intensified during the war unleashed by Azerbaijan in 2020 and continues to date, it is essential to have rehabilitation centers consistently funded by the state. Not only Armenian prisoners of war under control of Azerbaijani armed forces, but also civilians become victims of torture and ill treatment. Azerbaijan's aggression against Armenia negatively affects the internal reforms, since security matters have become the priority. On the other hand, cases of torture of civilians and captives by the Azerbaijani armed forces during the hostilities made the protection of the right to be free from torture even more urgent, which is difficult, especially as a result of unpunished acts of Azerbaijani authorities. We call on the international community to investigate the cases of torture and extrajudicial execution of Armenian prisoners of war and civilians captured by the Azerbaijani authorities. And on the other hand, to demand from Armenian authorities, despite objective difficulties, to make efforts to reform the domestic institute in order to eliminate violations of the right to be free from torture and conduct effective investigations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.